stream, and we just started the Facebook stream. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. So today's presenter is Hussein Adiyeh. We are talking about Harlem Prep, a Baha'i-inspired school and a solution to racial injustice. This presentation is based on the book, A Way Out of No Way, Harlem Prep, Transforming Dropouts into Scholars from 1967 to 1977, which offers a first-hand account of a unique school that attracted the attention and support of educators in New York City and beyond for its innovative educational philosophy and process inspired by the Baha'i teachings. It took poor, disadvantaged inner city dropouts and placed them in the best colleges. With its motto, Moja Logo, Unity and Brotherhood, Harlem Prep trailblazed a unique educational process and experience that provided the opportunity for many students to find their way to successful citizenship and more. With that being said, Hussein was born and raised in Tabriz, Iran. He is a sixth-generation Baha'i. His ancestors figure among the first in Tabriz to accept the BAHÁ'Í and later the Baha'i faith. Hussein immigrated to the United States as a young man of 17 years. Like many immigrants seeking a better life in America, he worked and attended college in the New York area. Hussein eventually completed a master's degree in European intellectual history and a doctorate in education from the University of Massachusetts. Dr. Adiyeh has had a distinguished career in education in New York. His proudest achievement is to have been one of the founders and assistant headmaster of the Harlem Preparatory School, a world-renowned charter high school for disadvantaged students. And as you will see, the school is credited with helping numerous people rise from poverty to a better life. And Dr. Adiyeh, he served as director of educational programs at Fordham University as well. Hussein has been a resident of New York City for all of his adult life. He served as treasurer of the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the city of New York for many years, and several times has represented his area at the U.S. Baha'i National Convention. In addition to Awakening, which has been translated into 6 languages, his book, Dr. Adiyeh has co-authored Abdul Baha in New York, and that's been translated into 3 languages. It's a concise, informative history of Abdul Baha's activities during his visits to the area. He's also written A Way Out of No Way, Harlem Prep, Transforming Dropouts into Scholars, 1967 to 1977, which, of course, is a Baha'i-inspired institute. His book is a comprehensive study about the life. He's written a new book, and it is a comprehensive study about the life of Tahirih and her American contemporaries. And it's in English and Persian currently. He's also written another book, The Foreigner, From an Iranian Village to New York City. And it tells the story of an Iranian Baha'i immigrant to the United States in a series of moving and humorous episodes set against the backdrop of a changing Iran, the plight of the Baha'is there, the tumult of the 60s and the 70s in the United States, and it is ready for you to read. Now, he's a producer of a few websites, and the one that I'm going to recommend to you now, it is www.harlemprepschool.com. I'm going to repeat it again, www.harlemprepschool.com. Harlem Prep, PREP, school, SCHOOL.com. And you can learn a lot more on that website. Without much being said further, I know today's talk is dedicated to someone special. Could we talk about that?
Yes. Is that?
There we go.
Yesterday, good morning. I'm Hussein Adiyeh, and as John was introducing me, I remember an incident that happened many years ago. There was an occasion that Amatul Bahar Ruhi Khanum was in New York, and I was supposed to introduce her to a large gathering of friends. A couple of thousand of them were there. Somehow I ended up chairing the meeting. So I started to collect information about her, and I was so nervous what I'm going to say about the wife of Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the faith. So I think I accumulated too much information. So I got on the stage and I started to talk. And those of you who remember Ruhi Khanum, she was not that patient with the detail and what I was doing. After 5-10 minutes of me just keep talking about her, she came on the podium, pushed me aside, and she said, the only thing Hussein did not say about me, what was the name of my secondary school teacher? But that she meant that, I have gone in too much detail. And I think sometimes the way that John was talking about this and that, it reminded me of that occasion. What happened when you live a long life like mine? You accumulate experiences, you write books, you travel, you set up website. So it's not really nothing extraordinary. We can always say that old age and my capable assistant, Tatiana, who are doing all this. The reason I have this picture on the screen is my favorite lady, Ann Carpenter. I'm just hoping, is there any former student of Harlem Prep who is present? Anyone?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay, because they may remember her. This lady and her husband were really the backbone and the founder of Harlem Prep. I was just a little assistant of them. And yesterday I found out that 10 years ago, she died. And I thought we remember her, we say a prayer about her. Maybe later on, I will talk more about her and her contribution to Harlem Prep. And my good friend, Tatiana Jordan, is going to say a prayer for departed.
The prayer will be in Bulgarian language.
Turn to the mic.
О, Боже! О, Ти опростителю на грехове! Дарителю! Отстранителю на злини! Моля те смирено да опростиш греховете на онез, които са се освободили от тленните си одежди и са се извисили до света на духовното. О, Господи! Пречисти ги от прегрешенията им. Прогони скърбите им, промени мрака им в светлина, позволи им да видят градината на щастието, пречисти ги с най-чистата вода и позволи им да видят Твоето великолепие на най-високия връх.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to start with a few points about myself and how I got involved in the Harlem Prep and this project that we're going to talk about. I think as part of the introduction, John mentioned that I was born in a small village in the southern part of Persia called Neiris. It had a few thousand people in the village. And as far as I know, the life and the town has not changed for last 2,000–3,000 years. It was agricultural town. And whenever I see a movie about the life of Jesus and how the Bethlehem and Jerusalem look like at the time of their living, it does remind me very much on my village with the no running water, with no cars, with no electricity, with no roads, very basic actually, with lots of mud houses and very simple life of the shepherds and goats and the fanatic Muslim. We were Baha'is, and then we became Baha'i. My ancestors were Baha'is. And then there was, from very beginning, a major persecution started against the minority of the people in the town, which they were Baha'i and later on Baha'i. And there were a couple of thousand of them in that town. The life was so bad for us after a while. I remember my own experience in the town, especially during the month of Harlem, when the good Muslim, especially Shia, remember Imam Hussein, and they go through a whole ritual. And it was, that month was so bad for Baha'is that they attacked their home, they attacked them in streets, and they destroyed the orchard. They often led to their killing and their martyrdom. So we escaped, we went to Abadan, and then later on, after the revolution of 1979, many of Baha'is who could not stand the pressure anymore, they went to Australia, Europe, and America. Of course, I came before that in the 60s, but this was the exodus of the Baha'is that took place in those years. I came to America as a student, he said. I had finished the high school, and I came to America with a big dream, because my image of America was Monroe, Gregory Peck, and Tony Curtis. These are some of the old-timer movie stars. And that's all I knew. I thought this is America, and I'm going to enjoy life. How little I knew that after 6 days of trip by the ocean liner called Queen Mary, I paid $50 to come from England to America. I landed in New York. I ended up in the YMCA downtown on 34th Street. And when I was in Tehran, I applied to a university. I wanted to be a nuclear engineer. So they told me Columbia and Harvard have that program. Of course, Columbia rejected me, but Harvard accepted me. So, but when I came to New York and I stayed in YMCA, I was planning to go to Washington to register for the University of Harvard. But they keep telling me, no, if you are going to Harvard, you have to go to Boston. How little I realized them right then that I was accepted to Howard University, not Harvard. So this was my first interaction or relation that started with my Black or Afro-American community in early 1960s. So of course I was poor, I was miserable, I had no money, I was a student, I was not allowed to work, so I had to work underground for cash. So I ended up working in the factories, in postal service, in a chemical company, in restaurants as a dishwasher, and then in the funeral houses, I almost became an undertaker, and on those jobs. I had the room, I remember, on 76th Street on Broadway, and I used to pay $7 rent a week, $1 a night. And sometimes I didn't even have that $7, so they would lock me out. And when I come with the $7, then they would take the lock out of my room so I could go in. Lots of wonderful memory. At the same time, lots of misery that I experienced in those days. Most people that I worked with those days as dishwasher in restaurants or in factories and places were young Black men and sometimes Black women. So I wanted to practice my poor English, which has not improved that much since then, because my English is really English I learned in restaurants with those friends of mine. I was trying to speak to them as much as we can. So I keep telling them about the Baha'is. I keep telling them about Baha'is, my ancestor, my friend, my family, how many of them were put to death and this and that. And it was so amazing that their stories of their ancestor was quite similar to my story. They were talking about they were suffering as minority. They were living in a southern state. KKK would come in town. They would burn crosses on the lawn. They drag the man out of the house. They would hang them by the tree, lynching them. I said, my goodness, this is the story of what they were doing to the Bobbies and later on Baha'is. So the reason I'm saying this, that there is an affinity, and there is a comradeship, and there is some special relation between the Baha'is and Black people in America. So this was my original relation with the minority in America. In 1963, I think it was, Martin Luther King had this large march in Washington, and few of us Persian and one or two American decided to go and participate in the march. Of course, we had no money to stay in a hotel or motel place, so we had to sleep in a car for a few days. But it was a glorious occasion to listen to this man and to go to some workshop, and John Lewis was there and a bunch of other people were there. And that really also left a wonderful impact on my mind. And I was dreaming that one day in my own country, a figure like him would arise and perhaps would make the changes. What I noticed that in his presentation and his talk, when he talked about the nonviolence resistance, how similar is the nonviolence resistance to what Baha'is are doing in Persia for the last 150 years. We have, after Bobby period was over, we have practiced nonviolence resistance all this time. Later on, around 66, I began to teach some courses at Baha'i school on the history of the faith. I knew a little bit about the early Bobby dispensation. I knew about Bab, Tahir, Mullah Hussein, and other major figures. And I was Persian Baha'i, and for American, it was unique. They didn't have that many Persian those days. I could speak a little English, and I had a big mouth. So I would go and teach courses in the Baha'i school. One of those occasions was at Greenwich Baha'i school. A couple showed up by the name Ed and Ann Carpenter, a black couple. And Ed Carpenter was a wonderful person, and he loved me, and he loved to come to my lecture and listen to the story of the Bab and all that. And during the lunch, he would have lots of questions to ask. Of course, in the course of conversation, he told me, and we found out that there is a potential of forming a school in New York City for the high school dropout or high school pushout. And I asked more about it, and I got very excited about the idea that as a Baha'i, we can do something worthwhile and tangible. It's easy to talk about the unity of mankind, elimination of prejudice, but if you have to take some steps, and I thought this is a small step that they can take, and I tried to join them. Came back to New York. They used to live in New Jersey. I went to some meeting, and I realized, my goodness, this is much bigger than I thought. The National Urban League is involved. The Manhattanville College and the nuns are involved. Some rich people, white people, especially Jews, New York Jews, they were very active, and they were in forefront of lots of this liberal and movement. So we participated in the discussion, and eventually, with the help of a wonderful man by the name of Whitney Young, who was the director of a National Urban League, wonderful figure. I will tell you more about him later. We decided, or they decided, to open a school in East Harlem for the high school dropout. Educational system in New York is pitiful. Not because it's a bunch of evils are running it, because the system is so big, the system is so outrageous, that it's hard to really, just the safety of the student is more important than the learning. I remember on one occasion, I had to go to visit a school in Bronx. I got by the gate, outside gate. There was a man standing there on the walkie-talkie. He said, "What's your name?" I said, I introduced myself as a big shot, Dr. Adiye. Dr. who? Dr. Adiye. So then he called up the guy on the walkie-talkie on the front door. This I'm talking. I want trying to say what the security they had. Hello, a doctor is coming. A doctor is coming. He couldn't pronounce my last name anyway. So I walked to the front door and I introduced myself. He called the guy who was controlling the elevator. Hello, Doc Adie is coming. Doc Adie is coming. So then I walked to the elevator. Then I got in elevator. I went to the 6th floor to meet with the principal of the school. This was a simple meeting that you have. Now, if you have to worry so much about security, what can you do for education? This is like our problem. So the school was formed, and the idea was that regardless of your age, regardless of what grade you were, regardless what religious you are, we had lots of black Muslim students, by the way, and Minister Farrakhan was very fond of us. And you come to us, you stay with us 1 year, and you give your best, and we will try as much as we can to help you to get to college. We are not going to give you a diploma because we are not a high school diploma manufacturer. We want to put you in college. If you could do it in 1 year, wonderful. If not, good luck. Go and get a job or do whatever. By luck, is 39 students that we got at the beginning, and with the connection, I think those nuns had, many nuns was helping us. We had such a wonderful bunch of nuns involved in the school. So they got all in colleges, Fordham, Columbia, Boston University, and a whole bunch of others. So suddenly the news get out that in the East Harlem is a miracle is happening. Bunch of people, bunch of kids who have, everybody has given up on them. They are making it to the best colleges. Boy, oh boy, money starts pouring. Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Brother Foundation, the Chase Foundation, Herman Miller, and Coca-Cola Company. They start to pouring money. You know, in America, what happened is that success brings success. So as the money was coming in, our number of students and faculty was increasing also. It reached a point, I think, toward the end, we had 600-700 students, and we had almost 100 faculty members. And that was unfortunate part, because it reached a point that became almost impossible to raise millions of dollars to continue. Foundation and corporation in this country, they love to support this kind of enterprise, school and all that. But they don't want to stay with any program forever. They give you what they call it seed money, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they move on. And they expect you to become sort of independent from them. And this, we didn't want to get money from government. We did not want to be part of Board of Ed, because otherwise then they would control and they would tell us what kind of faculty we can hire, what kind of a student we can take, what kind of book we have to use. We wanted to get away from union, from all that control that historically is dumping and destroying educational system in America. 10 years of operation, and I'm getting excited now because I remember all this wonderful thing that was happening. The school became a magnet for all educators from all over the world, from Sweden, from Japan, from Israel, from other places, from New York. They would come to see what the hell is happening, how these people are doing. They didn't know it was a simple teaching of Baha'u'llah that was doing it. When he said that every human being is a hidden treasure, is hidden jewel. All you have to do, discover it, polish it, and then it starts to shine. This was the life of our student. We were offering service, it was love, it was unity, it's open door policy. These are the combination that created amazing chemistry for successful operation. What happened? After 10 years, let me tell you about some of the visitors we had. Senator Javed, Governor Rockefeller, Jonathan Kozell, William Buckley, many leading Baha'is, Mr. Furutan, David Rue, Amos Gibson, all these are hand over causes and member of House of Justice. They would come, and they were so proud of what we are doing there and were trying to help us and all that. After 10 years, we could not raise any more money. And what happened is that between Ann Carpenter and myself, we have spent more time trying to go and beg and get some money than worry about what to do with the kids. So we begin to realize this cannot go on anymore. So we had the choice, either dying heroically, close the school, and make a big deal, make the front page of New York Times, another dream died, or trying to find job for this almost 60, 70, 100 faculties who needed a job, had family and all that. So they decided, it was a consultation, we tried to practice idea of Baha'i consultation as much as we could. We had many faculty members who were Baha'is, by the way, man and woman and all that. 50% were white, 50% were black. We decided to go with the Board of Ed. Chancellor Anker at the time and Mayor Beam, who was a mayor of New York, they support the idea. There were extensive negotiation was going on, and eventually Harlem Prep became part of the Board of Education. One incident happened here, which I like to mention. I love this story. There was a black guy, Dr. Jim Buffman, who was the head of the high school division for the school system of New York. And I was doing most of the negotiation about transferring the school to the public system. And all the time he referred to me, and he had a thick voice, Dr. Adieu, Dr. Adieu. And I would call him Dr. Buffman. So one day after a month of interaction, he turned to me and said, Dr. Adieu, you have a slight accent. How? A slight accent. I have a heavy accent. You have a slight accent. Where did you come from? I said, I'm from Persia. Persia? You mean Iran? I said, yeah, I mean Iran, but I'd rather say Persia, because when you say Persia, I think of Persian cat, you think of Persian rock, you think of a Persian glory of the past. When you say Iran, lots of fanatics come to your mind right away, and lots of corruption. So Persia is a better choice. And then he said, oh, you know, Dr. Adieu, when I was at Sorbonne during the war, he was a student at Sorbonne University in Paris, I had the roommate who was from Persia, Iran. I said, wonderful. And he said something was interesting about him. He had this black book, and during the holidays, summer, Christmas time, we would travel around Europe, and he had, in his book, he had some addresses. You know, those days there was no telephone and iPhone and all that. So we would go and knock on somebody's door. They opened the door, and my roommate, he would exchange a special secret code with the host. And right away, they would come out and they hug us and they kiss us. And they were so shocked to see a black man behind the door and all that. I always wonder, what was that code, that secret code? I said, Dr. Wolfman, was that code Allahu Akbar? Oh my God. As soon as I said Allahu Akbar, he jumped from his seat. He came and gave me a hug. And he said, you know, Dr. Adieu, for last 40 years, I've been thinking about this secret code. No, I'm glad you told me. Now, this, I will just say that my relation with the people are all that. I had a great deal of interaction with some of the leading Black civil rights leaders, Eugene Callender, Jim Farmer, founder of the Corps, Young, and on and on and on. This was because, of course, the love that they had for Harlem Prep. And the musician, Dizzy Gillespie, Sammy Davis Jr., Lionel Hampton, all these people who were trying to help the school by fundraising and by supporting the school. It was an exciting period in my life, exciting period in the life of those students. I really had the great admiration for this student and these young people. Condition has changed, but not that much. Remember, these kids were coming from environment. I try to indicate some of them. Bad housing. I don't know how many of you know how the life is in Harlem or inner city of America. Bad health, bad nutrition, broken family, amazing justice system. What else we have? And whole bunch of other no employment, terrible school system. For these people to succeed and break this vicious cycle is a miracle. And I think that's why they call Harlem a miracle, because we are trying to help them to break this vicious cycle. And a whole bunch of them did, and God bless them, and I love them all. I have some picture to show. I'm getting too excited. I may even have a heart attack soon if I keep talking. So let's show some pictures, and I will take it easy, and I try to explain through the picture some more stories. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure you have seen this picture. This is the march that I mentioned, 1963, with the march. This is my favorite picture of that occasion, of him and the march and the people. And I'm probably on my little mouse right in the corner someplace. Next. This is the typical, oh, you have to remember, there was no classroom. What happened, the school was a former supermarket, huge supermarket on the corner of 136 and 8th Avenue, the whole block. They opened a supermarket to make money, and then of course their manager, a couple of them get shot and they died. So they decided to close the supermarket. Was not worth it to your manager being killed constantly. So I think they gave it to us, and it was an open space. Herman Miller, which is a major furniture company, gave us thousands of chairs and blackboard and all kind of office items. So we set up a modular setting that could be easily move around and expand and reduce. And this is the openness that you can see. I think some media activity was going on. A company by the name of Union Carbide gave us a big contribution to set up our media department. And the kids were producing all kind of video stuff and movie. And remember, this is 1960s. And to have in Harlem, all these cameras and all this video stuff and teach a course in the media was quite an accomplishment. Next. Oh, that's my brother, Ed Carpenter. Ed Carpenter, I really felt like a brother with him. He used to call me little brother, and I called him boss. And we were trying to stay in the classroom as much as we can, because we realized the purpose is not to run the school as the administrator. The school is really, if you have some knowledge, if you have some training, we may as well share with the student, and that's what he was doing. Very charismatic figure. Oh, I remember another thing about him, which is interesting. As I said, there were lots of rich white people who were helping the school. One of them was a woman by the name Sheila Mosler. Sheila Mosler, her father, I think, had this train system that goes from New York to New Haven and to Boston. He owned the whole railroad system. And then her husband, John Mosler, had, if you go to the banks and you see all this huge safe, that was her husband. So she was a multi-millionaire. So in her apartment, somewhere in the Upper East Side, she invited some rich folks to come and contribute and help the school. That night, I was there with Ed Carpenter, and Ed Carpenter gave a talk. He was very charismatic. He was a great speaker. Everybody was so enchanted with his presentation about kids and education and all that. So at the end, one of them, he said, Dr. Carpenter, who is your guru when it comes to education? You know, everybody has somebody who they follow. So he said, Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah. So they were all shocked. Who is this Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah? And it was so funny. Next day, I think it was local paper, Amsterdam News, that the Harlem Prep guru, Baha'u'llah, Ed Carpenter said. So this was my brother. Jeremiah.
Internet may be breaking.
Oh, this is another interesting thing. This was, many of you probably have heard the name Olinga. Olinga was as you know, was a hand of a cause, originally came from Africa. He was a dear friend, and I loved him very much. One thing, I have made a presentation, I don't know, for the program, about our interaction with the hands when they were in New York. Many of them would come to New York those days, because New York had a big community. It was a major airline stop and all that. It was a hub type. And then because, you know, I had the car to drive them around, and I had the suit and a tie, so I looked presentable. So I would spend time with them. I went to airport and pick up Mr. Olinga that came to New York. And as we were driving to his hotel room in Manhattan from Queens, he said, Hussein, do you know John Gillespie? No, everybody call him Dizzy Gillespie, but his name is John. I said, yes, of course. He's a very good friend of Harlem Prep, and I often meet him because he come and help the school. He said, I'd love to see him. Is it possible while I'm here to get a chance to see him? I said, I'm going to call and find out. So I dropped Mr. Olinga in hotel. Then I called his house. His wife answered the phone. His wife never liked me because he knew every time I call, I want this to do something. Give a fundraising for Harlem Prep, give a fundraising for a Baha'i Faith, and he would not make any money because in average, when he would give a musical presentation, they pay him $10,000, $20,000 each time. But for us, it was free. So not naturally, she didn't like me that much. So I told Dizzy John that Mr. Olinga would love to see you. I said, I'd love to see him. I have written a nice piece of music in his honor called Olinga. It's a beautiful piece of jazz. And please bring him tonight. I'm playing in the Club Baron. Club Baron is a big club in Harlem. Bring him over. I said, fine. He has a presentation to do at the UN meeting. And then after that, we came there. So the whole bunch of us, these are people, we drove to the Club Baron. And as I entered the club by the door, I waved my hand because Dizzy was on a stage, just to let him know that we are here. Suddenly, he stopped the music. Again, he said, ladies and gentlemen, my brother, the conqueror of Africa, Olinga is here, and I'm going to play for you the piece of music I have written for him in his honor. So as he was playing the Olinga piece, Mike Longo was also there. We walked to our table, and everybody was getting up, excited, trying to shake his hand. They thought he was one of the king of Africa or a president. Hello, brother. Most of them were drunk anyway. So we finally got to our table. Within a few minutes, our table was full of booze. It's a custom in some of this nightclub that when you have an honored guest, they would send you a present of a whiskey or vodka or a scotch or wine. And I got so shocked. I see, my God, all this stuff on the table, and newspaper people are taking pictures, and they're going to blame me that he took the hand of a cause to a nightclub, and this is what happened. Definitely, I'm going to lose my voting right. So I told the waiter, please take this booze away. And he was surprised. He said, take it to the kitchen and give it to the help. So he did, and we ended up having lots of Diet Coke and Sprite that night. So that was a very amazing night of meeting of these two giants, Olinga and Dizzy. Thank you. Next picture. The man who's sitting at the middle is the chairman of the board of Exxon Corporation. Exxon was one of our main supporters. They gave us millions of dollars. In this particular occasion, I think he came with a check of $300,000. And you remember $300,000 in the early 70s was probably a few $1 million now. And these are all the kids, students, and faculty around him. He took a picture, and I'm sure he bragged about it all over the place, that they are saving Harlem Prep. Thank you, Exxon. We love you. Oh, this is the good-looking guy on the podium is me. And the guy on the right there is the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola Company. He came from Atlanta, I'm sure to participate in our graduation ceremony. This is one of our graduation ceremony. And it's so funny, I think that particular day, Minister Farrakhan, the one who replaced Malcolm X with Black Muslim Church Mosque in New York, was the speaker. And I was thinking, my goodness, look at the contrast. The chairman of the board of Coca-Cola Company is sitting next to the Minister Farrakhan from the Black Muslim Mosque. Okay, that's him. Next. Oh, Many of you probably remember this wonderful musician, Pete Seeger. He single-handedly, he cleaned up Hudson River. He got himself a ship or boat, and he was sailing back and forth along the river, all the way to Beacon and all those places north of New York, and was the river effort. It really, they got the government and agency to clean up the river. And he wanted some of our students to participate and to learn and to experience the natural setting and all that. So some of our students would go with him on the boat. Many years later, I met him in some occasion, I don't know where it was. And he was so excited to see me again, and I was so excited. He's another one I was in love with. God bless his soul, Pete Seeger. Next. Oh, the guy on the right is a fellow named Rostam. He's the one who organized the march of Martin Luther King in Washington. We invited him later on to come to a Baha'i meeting, and the guy on the left is my good-looking friend, Dr. Wishman Taraz, is myself and Mr. Rostam, the organizer of the Martin Luther King March in Washington. Next. Hayden was a Baha'i. He was what they call them, poet laureate of America, and his poetry are worldwide known to everyone. And he came to school a few times, and I loved him very much. It was so funny. I have a personal story. Shall I tell him a story about it? Yeah, he would come to Harlem Prep and give a presentation, and then I would make arrangement with him to go have dinner with him somewhere. So one time, I don't know, for some reason, we decided to take him to a fancy Greek restaurant in New Jersey. So I drove him to New Jersey, and I didn't know this. As we were eating, suddenly they announced that there is a belly dancer is going to perform. So a belly dancer came, and I don't know how many of you have seen a belly dancer. He performed, and I was so embarrassed to bring the wonderful Baha'i Robert Hayden to a restaurant, and belly dancer, half-naked woman, and all that. And I was a little, what to say. But then I noticed he kept taking his glasses out, and he kept cleaning them and put them back. So I realized he liked it. So next time he came, I asked him again, shall we go out for dinner? He said, Hossein, can we go to that Greek restaurant? So a few times, he and I went to that Greek restaurant. I don't know if they always had the belly dancer. So his wife, Irma, was a close friend of mine. And she was a delegate from Michigan, and I was a delegate from New York to National Convention. I wanted always to ask her whether Robert tell his wife that when he comes to New York, we go to the club together. And then we never talk about that, but he died. I went to his funeral in Michigan, and then I told Irma the story that, what we're doing in New York together. I said, Hossein, he loved you. All he talks about after he come back from his trip to New York was either Harlem Prep or a dinner in that Greek restaurant. So I'm glad I made Robert Hayden happy. Next. Oh, tough cookie. This is William Buckley. William Buckley was I don't know, your people are too young to remember all these people. He was a great conservative figure in the media and in America in the 70s, 80s, 90s. He wrote, his famous book was God is Dead at Yale. He was a Yale student. And he was really a spokesperson for the conservative movement in America. I got the call that Mr. Buckley would like to come and visit Harlem Prep. I said, oh my God, why the hell he wants to come visit Harlem Prep? This is not the right time. I'm in trouble. But anyway, I cannot say no. So he came to Harlem Prep. Went around, we showed him class, student, introduced him to some people. Then he said, is there any way I can meet with the more student? I said, yeah, but we have some time when we have a special guest, we have assembly. Right away, we close the classrooms, we move all the petition. It's a huge hall, a few hundred people can sit down. And we did that, so he began to talk. And he gave a very conservative point of view. And then we had a teacher called Dr. Ben Jacobin. Dr. Ben believed that everything started from Africa. Partially he was right, but he was exaggerating. Culture, religion, everything. So there was a debate between him and William Buckley for a short time. The meeting finished, a student got in discussion with him. And then after that, came to my office. My office was in the lower floor. And he said, I'd like to make a contribution to Harlem Prep. I said, it's wonderful. So I figured out he's going to write a check for $1,000. So he wrote the check for $50,000 that day. And he was so impressed with his contribution. God bless his soul. I think for that, he goes to heaven. Next. That's William Buckley. Stanwood Cobb is a legend. Stanwood Cobb and John Dewey are considered the founder of public school system. But then Stanwood Cobb became Baha'i in 1920s, I think, or maybe earlier. So he gave up the educational part and he went for pioneering Baha'i teaching and all that. So most people, they recognize John Dewey as really the founder of the public school system. But those who know the history of education, they also give him credit. So I invited him to be a speaker in one of our gathering. It was a large gathering and we invited many people. I remember president of Teachers College was there and a bunch of faculty of different universities because they knew him. So what happened, I also showed the next picture, John. I invited this group of young women who were our students at Harlem Prep, who were create this dancing group. And they were doing lots of drumming and dancing and all that. And this was right before his presentation. My God, this old man got so upset that he said, how can I talk about Baha'u'llah after all these naked legs and so much skins? I said, but Cobb, this is the young kids, they're performing. He said, no, they should not be on the same stage that I'm going to talk about Baha'u'llah. I'm going home. And he was leaving. Jesus, what can we do? No, a speaker is walking out. I said, Dr. Cobb, you don't talk about Baha'i faith. Talk about anything you want, but talk. So he said, okay, I'll talk about the Marxism and Baha'i faith, which was fine. He gave a marvelous talk that what is the wave of future? He said Marxism was Baha'i faith. And we know what happened. Marxism went out of the window. So that was my friend Stan. Know more about him. This is one of my favorite teachers, Robert Wilkin. He was our science teacher. And you see in the background, it said Mojo logo as a unity and brotherhood. Next. The one on the left again is Dr. Ann Carpenter, the wife of Ed Carpenter, my good friend. The one on the other side is Dr. Velma Ellis. She was also, we had the committee member who were also meeting in Harlem Prep a lot, called National Black Teaching Committee. And those days, all that teaching was going on in South Carolina, other places. We were involved in that. How you like my beer? Not good. I was looking good those days. Next. Oh. Oh, the guy who's sitting behind me, his name is George Simmons. He was one of our teachers. Ann Carpenter one day was walking on the streets of Harlem, and he noticed George was preaching, talking about some Christian things or some other thing. So he listened to him, and he was so impressed with George Simmons that he asked him, would you like to come and become a teacher at Harlem Prep? Can you imagine the guy haven't finished the high school? He came and he was one of the most wonderful teachers we had. The students loved him and probably learned more from him than anybody with a PhD. Or we had a couple of teachers who had a PhD, but we didn't care who had what degree, as long as they were committed. That's all it takes. Next. Oh, these are one of the nuns. The nuns were really the backbone of Harlem Prep. Manhattanville College, they were dedicated, they were really wanted to serve, and they loved what they were doing. And really, we should all be grateful to their services. Next. This is, I think, Elizabeth McLaughlin. This is the happiest day in the life of a school. It was a graduation day. Often the graduation day, we try to have it right on the corner of 125th Street and Adam Klein and Powell. That's a big, busy intersection in Harlem, because we wanted to really people of Harlem to experience and to stay close to us as much as we can. Parents were there, students, musicians, speakers, everything was there. It was a lovely occasion. Yeah, the support of community was so important for us. Really, I remember the word was out from Minister Farooq Khan, because those days the drug was a big problem in the inner cities. The word was out that if they found anybody around Harlem Prep, whether our student, others that are using drugs or pushing drug, they would break their leg. And they were so afraid that they may really do that, that all those years that I was there was no notion of using drugs or anything around. But on one occasion, something cute happened. Let me share that with you. I'm sitting in my office, and one of our teachers came to me, and he said, Doc, oh, by the way, they used to call me Jose, because they could never pronounce Hussein. So I became Dr. Jose. So he said, Doc, there is a guy upstairs with the gun in his hand, and he's walking around. I said, gun in his hand, walking around. So, of course, I went up to see what's going on. So I went, I said, yeah, he had a gun in his hand, and he's walking around. So I went to him and asked him, can I help you? So he used some vulgarity, I don't want to repeat. And who are you? So I said, I'm a school director. He said, you're no director. Because I said, what do you want here? He said, I want to kill somebody. No, I want to kill this person, mention his name. I said, why? He said, you owe me $20. I said, you owe you $20, you're going to kill him? And my God, what the hell can I do now? So I told him this. I said, listen, fellow, wait until 3 o'clock and kill him outside, so I don't get involved. Oh, he started to laugh. That was such a good thing. The school director is telling the guy, kill my student outside, so I don't get involved. I think that broke the ice. And I have a feeling I gave him $20 and he left, and he didn't kill my student. So that was
become himself.
And later on, he became a student. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, thank you, Tatiana. Yeah, that's true. Next. I'm having so much fun making this presentation. This is Ann Carpenter, the lovely lady that we say a prayer for her soul. And this is Chancellor Anker, the head of the school system in New York, in one of our graduation. I should make a movie about these things.
One day.
Next. Oh, this is again the chairman of the board of Exxon Corporation, and Harvey Spear was a big-time Wall Street lawyer, member of our board of director, and that's Ed Carpenter at the middle. Oh, that's Amos Gibson. He was a member of House of Justice. He came for a visit. Oh, something cute happened about him too. He came to school. We had a teacher in Harlem Prep. I hired him by name Al Burley. Al Burley was a sweetheart. It's amazing thing that in his earlier days, he was they call him a stick-up Burley, because he was no good, period. I don't want to go into detail of his life before. Somehow he became Baha'i, and it's amazing, the transformation was a miracle. He became an angel. I thought it's impossible. This is not the same person that I used to know. Anyway, he became Baha'i, and he was member of New York Assembly. He was such a loving soul, and he became one of our teachers. I told you that Union Carbide gave us a big grant for our media department. So I bought lots of cameras and stuff for him. He was our photography teacher. And he had this. And I keep telling him, Al, they're going to steal your camera. This is the open door. They keep people coming and going out. Don't do that. He said, Hussein, Baha'u'llah will take care of it. I said, Al, Baha'u'llah is too busy to take care of your camera. He has other problems. He said, no, he would take care of it. So Amos Gibson came to school, and I told him, could you please advise Al Burley not to do this kind of thing. So he turned to Al Berley. He said, Al, there is a saying in the Arab world that they said, praise to Allah, but tie up your camel. So after that, I think he listened to Amos Gibson. He never listened to me. He locked up his camera and we didn't lose any more cameras. God bless you, Amos Gibson. Everybody is dead except me. God, these are all people gone. Okay, next. Oh, this is Mr. Charles Rangel. He was I think he still is the New York congressman representing Harlem. In one of our graduation, I'm giving him some kind of plaque recognizing his services and his help. This is Dizzy Gillespie. Was a big help. That's my wife. That's me. And we're having a good time, the two of us smoking a nice cigarette. These are the nuns and the other faculty member. The one at the middle is Ann Carpenter. The first or the second nun on the right is the mother Dawd. She was an amazing woman. And one time she was selected by New York Times as the Woman of the Year. And because of her services to New York community. Next. Oh, and that's my favorite lady, Ann Carpenter, the one that we start the meeting with.
You're ready for questions. That's
Is it finished, John?
yes.
Okay. What we could do, if you have any questions or any comment, and if you have time, I'd be glad to answer them. Thank you for listening to me.
Yes, I have.
Sure.
Allahu Akbar John, Faride Hassan.
Allah Hafiz.
Well, you make my day today. I was so depressed because I remember all these people, all these dignitary Baha'i also came to Hong Kong. And now Baha'u'llah must you be alive to tell them about their story. You're doing a wonderful job. And if you remember 85, I came from Hong Kong to New York. And then I was speaking with the New York Baha'i feast. And one Baha'i African man, very handsome, he invited me. He said, I live in Harlem. Come to my fireside to talk about your Hong Kong. And I forgot his name. He was actors. And the time I want to go, it was night, and everybody said, don't go there, dangerous nighttime. I came from Hong Kong with a fancy silk cloth, very elegant. But I went there, Ya Baha'u'llah. It was packed, his home, packed of the people. And always I remember Harlem and this gentleman, he was actors. After many years, I asked him, there was Counselor Todd Yoon. You know, Todd lived he was caretaker of the Baha'i Center of Washington, D.C. I asked, I am looking for such person. He was actors, invite me Harlem for teaching. He said, it was my brother.
Exactly.
Do you remember what was his name, these actors? Live in the Harlem?
Jeff Owen. Jeff.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. Who said you are getting old? You're younger than everybody. That was so wonderful. This, you know, that's I remember. And then I go all the time teaching in Harlem. That was really you should talk to everywhere about this subject because very moving.
Speaking of fireside, I usually don't repeat this story, but I do it because of fireside and Harlem. In early 60s, the same person, Al Berley, that I mentioned, he was close friend of Malcolm X. And then there was another Baha'i by the name Frank Sawyer, who had a printing store in 125th Street. And Malcolm X needed a printing shop to print some flyers and do some of his publicity work. So they were close friends. And he came to a couple of Baha'i fireside, Malcolm X. In one of those occasions, I was there too. So he gave a typical talk that he always gave, you know, how bad are the white people, how, you know, this, you know, that's kind of, this was before he became more moderate and he went for a Hajj to Buckley and became a real Muslim. It was kind of extreme. So I couldn't help it. I raised my hand and I said, I think, did I call him Brother Malcolm or Mr. Brother Malcolm? not all the white peoples are as bad as you're describing them. There are lots of good people among the white community. So he turned to me and said, what's your name, young man? I told him Hussein. Oh, brother Hussein, when the snake bites you in Mississippi, then you come to New York, if you see a snake, you don't ask the snake, are you a good snake or a bad snake? You either step on his head or you run away from the snake. So I guess you want to say that this has been the experience of Black people that have been bitten by the snake all over. So that's how he's responding. So that fireside, and that particular fireside, of course, was in Harlem, was in the apartment house of Frank Sawyer. Next.
Dr. Adi, I just first of all want to say it is such a joy to see you, and so wonderful just to be in this space with you and to hear your stories. As you're talking, I'm thinking of the notion of the griot in West Africa, the storytellers, the keeper of memory. And I feel very much that you are a keeper of memory. So I just really want to thank you for your stories, which is so important to pass on to the generations, the subsequent generations. And you're such a wellspring of knowledge and experience. One of the things that I think is so wonderful about your journey is this proximity that you developed with the Black community. And, you know, as you're telling this story about how our Harlem Prep developed and the successes that it had, and the different groups that were involved, that were invested in those successes, whether you were from a wealthy family, whether you're a person with vision, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a student, but this cohort of different groups of people coming together to help this to be a success, I think is a real testament to the diversity of the human family, and how when we come together to uplift the downtrodden, we can make a powerful, powerful impact on our community and on society as a whole. And I wanted to just ask you, you know, oftentimes what happens, I find, when we talk about the issue of the oneness of mankind and unity, sometimes in certain segments of our community, there is there's kind of, we talk about it in the abstract. The proximity to different communities, we manage our proximity. So we're one human family, but I don't want to go and hang out in Harlem, or I don't want to go and hang out in Southwest Atlanta, or I don't want to go hang out in impoverished Detroit, but we're one human family. And so I think with you, what I think is really remarkable is that you actually, with intentionality, went into that community. You saw a need and you tried to play your part and did play your part in addressing that need. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about the importance of proximity, about putting ourselves in spaces where we are around people who are different than ourselves, seeing the connecting points and also learning from our differences and making a contribution to the oneness of mankind through that interaction.
Thank you, Master John. A thought occurred to me as you were mentioning these things. 1960s were a special decade with the Vietnam War going on, with the civil rights movement reaching its peak, with the assassination of John Kennedy and then Robert and then Martin Luther King, the campus unrest all over the place. So there was something in the air that allowed many of us, and actually, as I mentioned, there was a good number of white teachers at Harlem Prep, some Baha'i and some non-Baha'i, who had no hesitation whatsoever to come and be in proximity or be in Harlem and this and that. We often had the gathering of teachers and parents at nighttime, and some folks were saying that, how, as you said, aren't you afraid to go to Harlem? Then I see this young woman come all the way from somewhere in Brooklyn to attend the teachers and parents meeting. Now, the similar thing, not as romantic as it was in 1960, is happening last couple of years. That I feel something in the air. Well, you know, I'm in New York City, and I have witnessed lots of marches, especially since I'm in downtown Manhattan, close to Washington Square Park. That's where most of the march was taking place. And I see that almost 90% of the people who were marching were white kids, were white students and others. So this is really it's not just a Baha'i phenomenon. It's a human interaction, human love, and that you're experiencing. And thanks God, is happening again. I hope this basically answers. And thank you for showing up. You know, you are one of my guru.
Oh,
so, so I'm glad you are here.
No, you're my elder, and I learned from your experience, and God bless your efforts that you have made and you continue to make for this important work. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Dr. Adia,
Yes.
I love your presentations, a mixture of rich history and humor. That was fascinating, the question Alafani asked about all these different people coming together around this important thing that you were doing. And it was spiritual in its service. I'm wondering about William Buckley, because I grew up watching his shows, and he is probably one of the founders of what happened the last 4 years. And that's mean, but I had to say that. What was he debating? I missed the name of the person. And why do you think Buckley came to Harlem Prep and gave the money? What do you think moved him to do that?
Okay, I really don't think that he was evil. He had some bad ideas. He was in the wrong side of the issues often, but then it could be that even the people who are in the wrong side of issues, occasionally an idea or a system or a school moved them. And I think he did not do this for publicity, because I remember he also told me, Hussein, I don't want any student or faculty member know about my contribution. And they didn't know, I gave it to our accountant and they deposited. So William Buckley was a strange creature. He was, you have to admit historical fact, he was very bright at the same time, but he often was wrong. And it's true that some of his ideas and some of his stuff that he stands for contributed to what took place last few years and what happened to the conservative movement in America. I agree with that.
And the question was what he debated with
the person that he debated was very interesting. We had a faculty member by name Dr. Ben Jacobin. So you can Google him. He's a well-known figure in Harlem community and actually in the Black community as a whole. He was one of the original figure that began to write and lecture in 60s and 70s about the importance of contribution of Africa to civilization. And I remember some of his lecture that the teaching of Moses and Jesus, and then the scientific transformation of knowledge, it was all part of the Egypt and what happened in Africa. So of course, this was not the sort of thing that William Buckley liked to hear. So that was the debate between Dr. Ben, we call him, and then William Buckley in that occasion.
Please spell his last name.
Yeah, I wish I could do it. I would. Could you find out?
Yeah, I will.
Google.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Ben, and put in the chat room. Dr.
Okay.
Ben Jacobin.
Okay.
Next.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Dr. Adi, my name's Penny Greenwich, and I am a former student from Harlem Preparatory School. I did
I was
graduate.
hoping to be here.
And I just want to thank you and Ann Carpenter for establishing that school. I didn't know all of the history and the politics involved with fundraising because I was 17 years old and trying to finish my education after having dropped out of the New York City public school system and not really having any direction or any where to go with my life. And somehow my mom, who was very involved, heard about Harlem Prep because we lived in Brooklyn And she brought me to see Ed Carpenter, and I was tested, and we were so happy when I was accepted. And I just have to tell you, I believe I paid it forward with my life. I did graduate Harlem Prep in the last class, January 1974, as an independent school. And as you said, that was when the school was getting ready to be turned over to the Board of Education. And from what I understand, it didn't survive. It didn't do as well when it was in the hands of the Board of Education. After I graduated, I went on to college, finished college, and became a teacher. And that is how I feel I paid it forward. And I worked with a lot of minority boys because I was a special education teacher. And it seemed that that's where a lot of boys were placed in those types of classes. And, you know, I remember doing my thesis on my master's on teacher attitude and the placement of students, you know, in special ed settings. Special ed settings are good if you need them, but not all of my students needed them. They needed someone to understand them. And my job was to get them back out of the special ed setting and into the mainstream. So continuing, I ended my career as a school principal, and I served for 12 years. And I remember fondly my years of nurturing and growing in Harlem Prep. I didn't spend a lot of time, just a year and a half. I stayed a little extra. I needed that push. But recently I spoke to Barry Goldenberg, and he was interviewing us because he wrote a book on Harlem Prep. But I just want to, since Ed isn't here, I just want to thank you because you all really saved my life and launched me on a path of success. And I'm retired now and enjoying retirement from the same Board of Education, but I wouldn't have been able to accomplish that had I not been given the confidence also and the nurturing, which was so important. And I am very concerned about the state of New York City public schools at this time. They need another Harlem Prep. They really do. And hopefully, you know, this new chancellor we just got, maybe she will be able to bring about some change. But thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, I love you. And thank you for showing up. Really, you made my day.
Great.
I was hoping one of our former students would show. God bless you. Thank you, dear. Next, if there is a question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So there is a question. Well, actually, no, Penny, she already said that. So here's one question for you. How do you think we can start this again? How can someone start something like what you did again today when we need it so much now, just like we needed it then?
Actually, this may be bragging, but I would say that Harlem Prep was the founding father of all the charter school which is going on in this country. Even though they are not as idealistic and as successful perhaps as we were, but this charter school are trying to do as much as they can, and there are thousands of them around. And if the system allow it, because some of the traditional union approach and other is not working in their favor. So those charter schools are indirectly are inspired by the experience of Harlem Prep. On many occasions, good folks have approached me if I like to be involved to help them or to set up a school like Harlem Prep and things like this. And my answer is no, because first, I'm too old. It takes young blood and energy, and I'm 100% sure that there would be a school like that. What I want to say is that it doesn't take a large number of people to really make a revolution. It takes a small, committed group of people, especially Baha'is who have all these great ideas about unity and brotherhood and all that, to get together and try to do something tangible and something even small. You don't have to save the world. Just save your block and save the few kids around and do a small thing. And that's good enough in the eyes of God and eyes of our maker. That's my God feeling. But there are people who are really anxious to start a school like Harlem Prep.
Dr. Ade, could I just have one question, because you said something I think that sparked something in me. And also big sister Penny said this, just something in relation to this when she was giving her response. I'm thinking about the importance of being able to see in populations that are deemed to be less intelligent, less able to achieve, less able to compete. I wonder if you could talk about the spiritual lessons for you and the teaching that motivates you to see treasures and gems within communities that are often deemed by the larger society as less valuable than the dominant culture.
I think as a Baha'i, I'm very lucky, and my children are very lucky. If from the time that you're born, and if you're at least somehow sincere, if you constantly are told that the humanity is one, prejudice is bad, black and white are equal, man and woman are the same, this becomes part of your second nature. My children, Bobby and Linda, there is not a single bone in their body that shows any degree of prejudice, because they grew up with this ideology, with this teaching that we all are created by God and we are all the same. So unfortunately in American society, and also I should say that it has affected some of my Persian brother and sister also, that the notion is that, as you indicate, they are less educated, they are less capable, they are less, that they ignore 200-300 years of suffering when the one person was making promotion, going from one small house to bigger house, to better school, to better thing, better jobs. These folks, they had a history of suffering and being downtrodden all these years. All of a sudden, you want them to be equal. And he said, let's put the weight on the scale for both sides, equal size. There is no such a thing. You got to put a much heavier weight in one side if you really have intention of making any attempt to make some degree of equality. That's how I feel, and that's how I grew up because of teaching. You know that when you talk about the man and woman, one of the basic teaching that we have in the faith, that if the parents have enough money to educate either their son or their daughters, they should educate their daughters. It's such a phenomenon that coming from Persian culture, that the women are considered second-class citizen, that our prophet has said, give some education to women and forget about the man. Or when it comes to, let's say, another example I can give, when they teach us that if there is a voting is taking place, and a black man and a white man got the same number of votes, the black person would be elected automatically. Such an advantageous thing to give the people, for God's sake, a break that they needed. They have suffered. You have exploited them all these years, and now is a time to compensate. That's my feeling.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your encouragement, for your just for your continued unrelenting devotion to uplifting the downtrodden. I really, really appreciate that and love you for that. Thank you.
One thing I wish to add to that, in one of our previous talks, there was a teacher from Harlem Prep who was a young white woman at that time, and she was approached because of the way she was speaking publicly. So Ann Carpenter find her very intriguing and interesting to be a teacher. So when she learned about the Baha'is' involvement in the school, she mentioned, oh, these ideas are great, but they look like unrealistic. And she said, I was even so agitated by that I keep telling them, just don't talk to me about unity of mankind. Don't talk to me that we are all equal. I am far away from that. So she said, it takes her years working in the school and observing the relationships between people, teachers and students, to witness this love as a main principle, and teaching as teachers and students teaching each other about their differences, about their approach to life. That's how they all are in a learning mode in this school. And she later became a Baha'i, convinced that these ideas are far more realistic than she taught at the beginning.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Aziz. Shall we wrap it up?
Yes, I think it's a good idea.
Question. If there's a question, we are glad to answer it, but if there's no question.
Well, there was one last question.
Yes, please. Sure, go ahead.
So, you know how there is a very big emphasis in the Baha'i teachings on purity of motive, purity of thought, and more importantly, how there is this concept of truthfulness being the foundation of all human virtues. Now, tell me, what would the success of your initiative have been if you weren't fully committed, if you had any inconsistencies in what you were doing? What would have happened if the children saw you as a hypocrite, not walking what you say, not doing what you say?
The people that I remember were involved in Harlem Prep, even though they may have all kind of shortcomings, including myself, but they were so enchanted with what was going on around them, and the whole dynamic of the environment, of the motion, of the learning, of helping, it brought the best part of them out. So even if they may have had some vanity, they may have some other ulterior motive, but then they tried to do their best. There is a school of thought, I understand, that they said that even if you are no good, try to be good as much as you can. After a while, this trying to be good become your second nature. And Abdul Baha, I think, talks about that. So I have a feeling that this applies to all of us, that if we are truthful as much as we can, if we are honest as much as we can, soon or late, we become truthfulness and honest person. That's why I think sometimes I see that, I shouldn't maybe mention this, well, I say it anyway. I see the difference between my Persian Baha'i friend and the non-Baha'is. I see these Baha'is because generation after generation, they were constantly reminded about the truthfulness, about the backbiting, about the honesty, about this and that. It has become part of their DNA. And whether they like it or not, they do behave as good as they can. Even if you pretend to be good, after a while you become good. This is, I really sincerely believe in that. So that's how I can answer your question.
Well, thank you so much for that, because a lot of people could use that advice in their lives. Jeremiah is saying there's a question from Jamie, but I don't see it.
John, can I add something while you're looking for the question?
Sure.
I'll be brief. Ms. Grenage said something that's very important. Dr. Adaya, I taught at a HBCU, Historically Black College, which was founded when the southern states didn't give money didn't let Blacks go to the school. I find that at Harlem Prep, you had love and an attitude that the students could do anything. And that was conveyed to them. And look what happened with one of your students. She put that concept out there as a policy issue that we need to look at. Why are these teachers putting little Black boys, labeling them as bad and targeting them for the criminal justice system? But your teaching created a student who could carry forth the work. But Harlem Prep taught those kids you could do anything, and that's the love.
That's true. But actually, this reminds me one more thing I would say. I was in Chicago attending National Baha'i Convention. I was flying back to New York City. And whenever I fly, I always like to sit in the aisle seat. So, and I'm hoping and I'm praying that nobody would take the middle seat. So for this long journey, I would have a little more leg room. So my eyes is constantly at the door and everyone who's coming in. I mean, some of you probably have gone through this experience. So people passed me by, and the plane was almost full, but still there were lots of seats available. Just before they closed the door, this woman walked in, and between all the seats available, she came and sat next to me right at the middle seat. So of course, that's how life is. So she sat down, then next thing you know, she turned to me and said, Dr. Adie, do you remember me? I said, oh my God, not only she took the middle seats, no, she knows me too. So I said, no, I don't, I'm sorry. I don't remember, I'm getting old. He said, I was one of your former students. I said, you must be kidding, that's wonderful. What's your name? And she gave me her name. And we got in conversation, but here we talk about Ed Carpenter, Ann Carpenter, Harlem, and this and that. So I asked her, what are you doing these days? I found out, this is amazing. Peggy reminded me of her, that she has gone and got her PhD and MD. This is an amazing combination. That, you know, there are some folks who can do it, get a joint degree. PhD and MD. PhD, I think, was in public health, and MD was a medical doctor. So no, she was working, either was a top-notch or director or commissioner or deputy commissioner of some public school system, public health system in one of the states in Midwest. And I was so proud of her that, you know, this is just one example of what we have seen. They did actually, I think, was a Ford Foundation, because they gave us so much money. They, after a few years, they gave us a grant to follow up on our students who have gone to college and to see where they are and how they're doing. So it was an extensive study. And they found out that not all of them, but a good number of them have stayed in college, had finished the college, and are, you know, having jobs and doing their own thing. So God bless all of them. That's it.
So we have one last question from Jamie Manfra,
Sure.
and then we can close out for today.
Okay.
So Jamie, if you could unmute yourself.
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. This has been incredibly inspiring and informative. My question is, did Harlem Prep begin as an official charter school? And if not, at what point did you decide to file as a charter school, and why did you make that choice?
In the state of New York, in order to receive contribution, in order to run the school, you have to be charter. So there's a special department of education in the state of New York, and we got ourselves right from beginning, what they call it, a provisional charter. And what they give you this provisional charter, they let you practice and let you open and continue for a while. Then they come and they do a serious study, and they find out where we stand. Are you fulfilling your original goals and ideas and all that? And I think they did that too. And definitely we were chartered by the state of New York to run a school. What happened is, I don't know why I remember all kind of stuff there. You know, as a charter school and as a part of a school system, you know, in New York State, private or public, you have to follow certain rules and regulation. And one of them apply to holidays and when you can close or open the school. So as I said, we had a whole bunch of Baha'i teachers in the school, and some of them were quite anxious to close the school in the Baha'i holidays. And of course, even though I was sympathetic to them, but as a school administrator, I could not allow that to close the school because we are Baha'i. So came to assembly and complained.
Dr. Adia, you cut out.
Okay.
You said something and then cut out.
So go back to the point that.
So one of the teachers who was a Baha'i was upset that how come we are not closing the school during the Baha'i holidays. So he came to New York Spiritual Assembly and complained about what I'm doing and what the school is doing. And it happened, I was a member of assembly, as I said. So I actually, when it came to the voting, I agree with her. I said, she's right. we should close the school. But then we have to remember we had the laws and regulation to follow. And you also remember what happened with those wonderful schools in Persia called Tarbiyat. There was a major school system the Baha'is had in Iran. And then the Shah, the king of Persia, the father of the last Shah, one of the schools was close to his house. And then he would hear in the morning some Baha'i singing that these kids were doing in the Baha'i school. So on some occasion, he would not hear it. So he would ask, how come the kids are not singing? So they told him it's a Baha'i holiday. And they are not there. He said, what? Baha'i holiday? And they are not in school? He got very upset. He said, close all the schools. So they closed the entire Baha'i school system, quite a number of them who were, because this man, the king, decided he likes to hear the Baha'i singing in the morning every day. So that I thought I just mentioned, and you cannot just go ahead and do what you want. You have to follow some system. I'm finished.
That's interesting. I was silent processing what you just said.
Okay.
So thank you, Dr. Adia, for joining us today. We, more importantly, have to remind the audience that that Dr. Adia is an author. He's written about his episode working in this amazing initiative. And you can find this. We have a link for it on www.clearwaterbaha'is.org. I'll tell you the link direct to www.harlemprepschool.com to learn more information. www.harlemprepschool.com. Dr. Adia is, of course, a author of several books, prolific writer, if I do say so. And this information for Harlem Prep School is one of his accomplishments that hopefully you can learn more about. So maybe you can replicate in your own life, in your own neighborhood, in your own country, your own locality. So that being said, we have another talk or series of talks you can find online on YouTube. If you just go to Clearwater Baha'is, you can find more. Of course, here on the Facebook page as well. And we will have future updates if you sign up on www.clearwaterbaha'is.org. If you register, you can get updates as to what events are happening, and you can also join on the Sunday. So again, thank you, Dr. Adia. We look forward to having you again. This was an amazing subject, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you, all participants. Thank you for your love.